Coming up, arrested and charged. What happens now? President Trump promising changes to federal gun laws. Will Kansas or Missouri follow? The shakeup in the race for Kansas governor and shutting it down on both sides of state line.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes. It's been an extraordinary week in the news. Here to make sense of it all, from KMBC 9 News, Chief Political Reporter Michael Mahoney, from Fox 4 News, Morning News anchor Mark Alford, reporting for The Pitch, KCUR and KCPT, Barbara Shelley, and Kansas City Star columnist and editorial writer Dave Helling. Missouri Governor Eric Greitens was preparing to leave town this weekend to attend a meeting of the nation's governors in Washington. Instead, he is arrested and taken into custody by deputies in St. Louis. It's a story making national news this week.
There's more breaking news tonight. The Republican governor of Missouri, Eric Greitens, indicted late today. The governor was taken into custody and later released on his own recognizance. He was charged with first-degree felony invasion of privacy.
The charges against the governor are baseless and unfounded. Eric is absolutely innocent of these charges.
That's the governor's attorney, Edward Dowd. The governor himself issued a statement saying the charges were a misguided political decision from a reckless liberal prosecutor who proceeded to file an indictment that has no facts. 6 weeks ago, Greitens acknowledged having an extramarital affair with his hairdresser, but denied blackmailing her to keep her quiet. So what new facts, if any, has Kimberly Gardner, the top prosecutor in the city of St. Louis, now presented?
One of them is the fact that in this charging indictment, it says that not only was there a picture knowingly taken of this woman without her permission or her consent, but that it was also made available on a computer where it could be seen. The spokesman for the attorney's office will not confirm that, but they don't deny it either. That's one of the big things that comes out of this in terms of the new facts. The governor has consistently dodged the question of whether or not he took a picture. And sometimes he said that there was no photograph taken, Nick, in terms of any intent to blackmail. But the connection to the computer is probably why, and I'm not a lawyer certainly, but it's probably why it's a low-class felony rather than a misdemeanor. And interestingly enough, the political context of this defense continues this morning on Friday morning, because the Missouri GOP came out with a statement and said this is a political hit job, very similar to what the governor said in his statement, that this was a reckless Democratic prosecutor.
Now, he will not appear back in court, the governor, until March 16th, but we also have Republicans in the Missouri legislature, Dave Helling, calling for the governor to resign. But a lot of those same faces, same names, were the same ones who said it 6 weeks ago, and he didn't do it then. Why should we think for a moment he would resign now?
There are a few new names calling for resignation, but the more important thing out of Jeff City yesterday in terms of the legislature is the movement on impeachment, or at least some sort of investigatory committee that might lead to impeachment. So your audience knows, Nick, it's a little different in Missouri. The Missouri House instigates an impeachment proceeding, and if they find reason to believe that an impeachment should proceed, the Senate appoints a committee of jurists who will then judge the governor going forward. That process is perhaps the most dangerous one that Eric Greitens faces, other than whatever may happen in court, because impeachment is a broad tool that a legislature can use, and if that train starts to leave the station at any speed, then the pressure for him to resign will grow because the House will be so wrapped up in it.
But it requires a huge majority of lawmakers to approve impeachment, and this is still an overwhelmingly Republican legislature in the House and Senate, Barbara.
Well, this is true, but there's survival, and then there's kind of what can you do as a governor? What can you do with the agenda that you had? What can you do with your ambitions, which in the case of Governor Greitens clearly led beyond Missouri? You know, just recently he's been on television promoting his tax plan. He has a paid ad on television, which is unusual. It's not an election season. And at what point do people not hear him talking about tax plan and think about duct tape and blindfolds?
One of the big political problems for the governor right now is he does not have a broad alliance of Republican legislators that support him on anything. His tax plan is in tatters. They're going to go another way with a smaller plan on that. His plan to cut higher education is dead in the water. He opposes a fuel tax increase. It's likely there's going to be a fuel tax increase on the Missouri ballot. One of his problems all along has been poor relations with Republican legislators in Jefferson City, and so he doesn't have a body of allies back there to back him up.
But you said also, Michael, that beyond Republican lawmakers in Jefferson City itself is what impact will this have on the donors themselves who've contributed to Eric Greitens' campaigns?
There are two things for the folks to look for on this. Number one is what happens to the Eric Greitens donor base and the Republican Party of Missouri donor base if it collapses in terms of their support for Governor Greitens. It's going to be hard to track on that because the governor's political action committee is very good at hiding contributors and the amounts of money. The other thing that people should look for is on June the 5th, there's going to be a special election for a state senate seat in Clay County, which might be the most purple of all the counties in Missouri, a true battleground state. It's going to place a Republican versus a Democrat to replace Ryan Silvey, actually fill Ryan Silvey's seat. He took a job with the Public Service Commission. One of the big issues there is going to be right to work. The other one may be a bit of a referendum on Eric Greitens. Those are two things to watch for.
Nick, the other big question in this, what happens to the woman who was involved in this affair several years ago? She has not expressed any willingness to cooperate. She did not want the investigation to happen. She wanted to keep it low-key and move on with her life after her divorce from her husband, who actually brought all this about through the revelation of these tapes. So do you drag her through the court system? She's going to have to testify if there is a trial. Do you drag her before the House because she's going to have to testify in front of an impeachment proceeding? It could be very devastating for her and her family.
Yeah, but at the same time, a key in legal proceedings is to present the accusers. This woman is central to that, and so I don't think there should be any expectation that she's not going to be testifying in court if it gets that far.
I think all my colleagues would agree with this. It puts Eric Greitens in a very difficult spot because normally you might plea bargain, you might reach some agreement with the prosecutor to spare the woman of the need to testify, to spare the state of an open trial in which these sordid allegations would be put before a jury. But any plea, Eric Greitens' career would be over. I mean, the legislature would kick him out almost overnight, one thinks, and therefore he has to fight it or has to quit.
But let's not forget that Eric Greitens himself has a family. He has a wife and he has 2 small children, and the longer this goes on, the longer it goes on for them as well.
Again, we tape this program on a Friday morning, and we know more than anyone around this table that anything can happen. President Trump this week meets with students and parents from Parkland, Florida, following a school shooting that left 17 dead, and he promises policy changes to prevent it from happening again.
We're going to be very strong on background checks. We'll be doing very strong background checks. Very strong emphasis on the mental health of somebody.
Just a few moments ago, I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns.
Now, even Kansas Senator Pat Roberts this week calling for age restrictions on firearms. Roberts, who according to the Associated Press is the 13th highest beneficiary of NRA money in Congress, says no one under the age of 21 should have access to the kind of rifle used in the Florida school shootings. Roberts just ran for re-election in Kansas as one of the Second Amendment's greatest supporters. So why the change in perspective, Michael?
Well, changing his position and executing that are two very different things. And Senator Roberts can say what he likes. Let's see what happens. The proof is in the pudding on this. And I personally, I don't think that there will be change one anywhere.
What about in Kansas and Missouri? Are we seeing any changes being made at this point in time?
I don't think there's going to be change. I don't think there's going to be change one. If there was any prospect for change, it would be after small kids at a grade school were slaughtered 2 weeks before Christmas at Sandy Hook. Nothing happened then.
Barbara. Well, let's remember that after Sandy Hook, actually, that set off a phenomenon in legislatures, and Missouri in particular, where legislators just doubled down on gun rights. And in 2015, Missouri, went to the ballot with a constitutional amendment that actually is going to make it really hard to pass gun safety laws. It declares, the right to gun ownership is an unalienable right and sets a high bar for restricting that at all.
No, closer to home, Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker is shaken by the Florida shooting and announces a gun summit for next month.
Can't wait for Congress to do something, to find courage. I can't wait.
Meanwhile, Sly James sends out an open letter to students encouraging them to demonstrate, saying they can't wait for adults to save their lives. They are, in his words, unable, unwilling, or incapable of doing so. What impact has that had, if any, Mark Alford?
It's created some outrage among people wondering where is the outrage for the 150 people who were killed last year in Kansas City, Missouri alone, most of whom were killed by gun violence. Where's the marches for those people? Why isn't the mayor doing something about that? Why write a letter to encourage students, which I'm all for students getting involved in political discourse, but why encourage them to take action on this, and why not the people at home to protect the people here?
Mark, as you well know, both our stations regularly cover vigils. There are marches. It's not like it happens in a vacuum.
Well, and just to be clear, Sly James has been fairly aggressive on gun issues throughout his time in office. It isn't just after this recent event in Florida. And he is frustrated, as most urban areas are, that gun laws are largely determined at the state level by rural lawmakers who are overrepresented in virtually every legislature in America. And because of cultural reasons around guns, it's hard for cities like Kansas City and St. Louis to enact more stringent gun possession laws than the rest of the state, even though those cities might prefer to do so. Mayor James has made that point on several occasions. That's why, in part, as Mike suggests, actual progress, absent any federal action, is going to be difficult.
Last weekend, there were about 30 protesters demanding changes to gun laws on the Country Club Plaza. Meanwhile, a few miles up the road at the KCI Expo Center, nearly 66,000 people, looking over and buying the hardware at the Kansas City Gun Show. Did the shooting encourage more people to go out and buy guns, fearing they might be harder to access in the future, Mark?
I think anytime you see it, we saw this after Sandy Hook, and when there was proposals put forth by Senator Feinstein of California to really reenact the so-called assault gun ban, that people would go out and buy these because I think they would no longer be able to do so. I don't know if you've seen that in this case. I know after the Las Vegas shootings, there was an increase in bump stock sales. I anticipate that if that's going to be a renewed part of the conversation, there will be more. Some reason people think they need to have bump stocks. I personally don't own one, but some gun collectors do.
You know, Mark, I talked to the promoter of that show, and he said that that show was just rife with rumors that something was going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything
That's
about
all it takes.
But exactly. That's all it takes. And he said the place was white hot with those rumors, and he expected, I didn't talk to him after the show, but before it, he expected an increase in purchases, especially on the AR-15s, which are a very common weapon.
And the gun manufacturers love it. Their stock goes up, and they've been taking a hit lately.
Yeah.
You know, after Sandy Hook, then Kansas Governor Sam Brownback said this is a wake-up call. We need to spend more time, more attention on mental health, just like we're hearing right now. He said at the time we need to be looking at those who are mentally ill and resistant to treatment. What happened? What changes took place? Did we see more money for mental health in Kansas as a result of that?
Oh, no. You saw the mental health budget plummet along with the budgets for every other service in Kansas because of their tax cuts and budget problems. It's so easy for politicians to say that, but it's so easy for them to cast that promise aside.
Dave.
Schools, however, after Sandy Hook, did undergo a fairly thorough review of their security procedures. I talked to the Blue Valley District last week after the Florida event, and they did a very exhaustive study and recommended some changes. They did not recommend others that would further harden their schools. And my guess is one of the things that will happen is there will be a push to provide more security officers, bulletproof glass, other changes, doors that lock from the inside in some schools that lack them. You will also see this, and I must say, in our view, absurd push for more teachers to carry weapons in schools. But that was one of the real impacts of Sandy Hook. We may see that again.
Dashcam video released this week shows in detail how the fatal police shooting of a Blue Valley Northwest High School student unfolded. The video was released at a press conference in which the Johnson County District Attorney said the shooting was justified and no charges would be filed against the Overland Park officer who killed 17-year-old John Albers.
Stop the car! Shots fired. He's down. We need medical ASAP.
A lot of outrage at the time of that shooting. Did this video change any public perception about the shooting, Mark?
I think it did. When you're able to, number one, hear the full 911 tape and know what the officer's mindset was going to this, and you're able to see two different aspects, and one police officer's cruiser on one side, the other side of the street, you're able to get a full picture of what those officers were experiencing and almost getting killed themselves in their estimation by this van that was, which is a weapon in the eyes of law enforcement. That's why they decided this was justifiable.
Michael.
You know, there's a myth that is propagated by the TV shows and movies. Well, why don't they just wing him in the arm, hit him in the leg or something like that? It doesn't work that way. And people say, well, why not shoot out the tires? As we just saw on that piece of video, this is a very stressful situation for the cops. Lots of shots were fired. These guys are trained on a regular basis to use their firearms, and it was still a very stressful situation for them, which what I'm doing, Nick, is tying this back to the discussion about arming teachers that are not going to be nearly as trained as a police officer or anybody in law enforcement, and that's why people have misgivings about that. And it is very, very, very difficult to mount a successful prosecution against a law officer for an unjustified shooting.
And this also ties, of course, to mental health, that they were responding in this case to a suicide threat. John Albers threatened to kill himself. Right. There were people complaining at the time, aren't we supposed to have police officers who have mental health training? Yeah. The police saying this week that there were 2 crisis intervention officers heading to the scene. They just didn't make contact.
They were trained. There were trained officers heading there. But I'm not sure that everybody's going to come to the conclusion that Mark just articulated. You know, what I see there is the initial shots being fired when they didn't have to be. I see the officers firing very quickly into this van. And to tell you the truth, if I were a parent and I had a troubled child, if I saw that, I would think twice about calling the police to help with the situation.
In less than 6 months, voters in Kansas will be picking their party's candidates for governor. This week, Republicans held their... That wasn't me singing. That was the national anthem in progress, ladies and gentlemen.
My back went out again,
this week. New Governor Jeff Collier was a no-show, and one of the race's other main hopefuls had pulled out of the race. Wichita oil tycoon Wink Hartman said after the debate it became clear to him he might end up being a conservative spoiler. He is now throwing his support to Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach. What difference does this make, if any, to this race, Dave Helling?
Well, it'll make a marginal difference. I don't think anybody thought Wink Hartman was going to be the favorite at any point. And he did
with
have
a name like
support.
Wink, it was a successful
name. He did have
name.
some support. Some money may end up.
Don't blink for Wink.
The 2 front runners remain Governor Jeff Collier and Secretary of State Chris Kobach. Now, there's some argument this week that Kobach is actually in the lead, even though polls show him slightly behind, because he has strong core supporters. But it is fascinating to me that Kobach, whose name recognition is nearly 100%, everyone in Kansas has a view about him, can still only muster 21% of the field in a Republican primary. That suggests he has a floor of about 20%, but may have a ceiling of about 20%.
But some of those polls, though, had a huge number of people saying they didn't know. And now those people don't want to say this.
But I think my point is that in some ways, in a weird way, Chris Kobach might like a larger field, because at that point he can win with 21%. As the field narrows and it becomes just him against, say, Jeff Collier, might be more difficult.
And the other thing here is to remember on this poll, it's a 2-horse race according to the numbers, but it's also February. and that's a lifetime away from the primary in August. And I would be very careful about reading too much into a poll. What was more interesting was the dynamics of that debate, don't you think, Dave?
Yeah, it was, and the decision of Jeff Collier not to attend, he said he was ill, so we'll give him that. But they'll have to engage at some point. And I would say I agree with Mike, except that it is February, almost March. The primary is in August. This thing is going to start to be joined fairly soon, and we'll see.
I do believe Governor Collier, when he says he was ill, he had a flu-like illness. But I don't know, having interviewed him, and maybe you feel the same way, Mike, that Governor Collier's best arena is the debate field up against the likes of Kobach and others. Collier is a very well-spoken man, but he speaks in sound bites.
Okay, if that's happening so many months from now and it's only February, there are more immediate concerns. Next up, they're shutting down on both sides of state line. We begin with the Plaza 3 Steakhouse, which announced this week it's shuttering its doors after 54 years on the Country Club Plaza. The high-priced eatery is one of the shopping district's oldest tenants. Is this just the normal evolutionary cycle of a business? Or is it a red flag about challenging times ahead for the Country Club Plaza, Mark?
Nothing is ordinary about the Plaza. It's an icon of Kansas City. People who come here want to go to the Plaza. I'll give it this. It is a normal occupancy rate, probably for a mall, but the Plaza is not a mall. And we've seen store after store close. We had halls move out.
Yeah, well, you actually shot some video. Let's take a look at that.
I was down there yesterday, and I thought, I'm just going to drive around, shoot some pictures of the stores that are closed. Halls is closed. They put a Nike store in there, and that's where they later had a robbery with some people using mace to steal tennis shoes. Talbot's closed down, moved out, and instead they're putting a hamburger place, a nice hamburger place. Williams-Sonoma's gone. Plaza 3 soon to be. But there's Houston's. I can't forget about them. But there are some places, there is a hole in our plaza, basically, that needs to be filled. And it's interesting to see how this new owner is going to do this. There's already some talk that the lighting ceremony may be scaled back. It costs $200,000 to put on. And there's also talk that the art fair may be scaled back. They've already removed one stage.
A red flag, Dave?
Well, we talked about this on this show, and I've written about it a little bit, Nick. It's undeniable that the way people buy things, retail goods, is changing. And that's true in the Plaza, Oak Park Mall, wherever you want to go. And so the challenges on the Plaza are not unique. But I do think something else is going on that may be related to the new ownership, which is an understanding that the Plaza may increasingly become some sort of an entertainment district, restaurants, clubs, that type of thing, and less retail-oriented because it's just harder to sell shoes and handbags than it used to be.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, Dave, is you can't get a good steak on Amazon.
I agree.
Okay, and
good point.
And the other thing about that is, I'm just going off the top of my head here. That joint opened in what, 1963? Okay, that is an astonishing run of for any sort of restaurant in a killer business. You know, so. I wouldn't read too much into that. Your point, Mark, though, is well taken, and Dave too. That the nature of this may change. Scaling back on the Plaza lights. I don't know if that's a great idea.
I would say just
the art fair. I don't know if that's a great idea.
Yeah, I would say that the people of Kansas City have invested a lot emotionally in the Plaza, more than any other district probably in America. And so whatever needs to be done to protect it will probably be supported by the vast majority of the public on both sides.
I don't want my kids saying, "Remember the Plaza?"
Yeah.
Well, also shutting down after nearly 30 years, the Metro's longest-running jazz festival. Well, it's no more. Organizers behind Jazz in the Woods in Overland Park say they simply couldn't find the funds to continue putting on the event. In the past few years, it drew crowds of about 10,000 people a night over 2 nights in Corporate Woods. The announcement comes just as another news story probes the future of the 18th and Vine Jazz District. By one accounting, the city has spent more than $100 million on the district since 1990. The city council has already pumped more than $700,000 into the American Jazz Museum this fiscal year to keep it going. And according to a Kansas City Star column by Dave Helling, in a few weeks, city officials will consider spending another $730,000 to bail out the operation. Do we need to redefine our view that we are a jazz town, Dave?
Well, jazz is always under pressure, broadly speaking. I mean, it's hard to find a lot of paying customers for jazz, at least on a big scale, so that's involved here. But the Jazz Museum story is something even more unique because there is a concern that the 18th and Vine district is not attracting enough customers, and therefore the subsidies, which are typically $500,000 a year for the Jazz Museum, for example, need to be increased. Next year, they want to spend $750,000 over the year after spending $1.5 million to keep the thing going this year. That has to change, Nick, and there has to be a good conversation about what 18th and Vine is going to be. Is it a tavern district, a bar district, a family district? And that conversation is going on now.
In the blues community of Kansas City, there is a lot of talk about using 18th and Vine because it was 12th and Vine and it was blues in Kansas City as much as jazz, at least in my perspective, that contributed to the vibrancy of the music scene back in the day and certainly now. And so that's also something to throw into the cocktail of what happens at the district.
I think there are a couple of things. For people to go down there and have an experience, even those who live in Johnson County, no matter where you are, you've got to feel safe, there's got to be good lighting, and there's got to be adequate parking, and you have to enjoy an experience.
But the fact, though, that even in southern Johnson County they couldn't support a jazz festival, doesn't that say something about that particular theme?
I think people attended the festival in Johnson County. The problem now was getting corporate donations. I don't think they used public subsidies for that festival.
It's all through the Rotary Club down there.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I always wondered why with 18th and Vine they didn't move like right from the very beginning to get more restaurants down there. You know, they have two museums. You know, families would want to come go to one museum, get a sandwich, go to another museum. It's just kind of a hole down there.
Michael.
After spending years on a volunteer board, it's hard to describe exactly how difficult it is to go out and effectively fundraise. And no matter what the attendance was for that event down in Johnson County, it is hard to raise money when you're a small organization.
We know nothing about that in public service. That is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our new reviewers. From all of us here at KCPT, I'm Nick Haynes. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.